right, welcome back to the House Really podcast. I'm here with Vince Benevento. Hello.
Good morning. Hello. Nice to see
Nice to see you too. How is this morning for you?
you. It's good. It's good. It's like all days, a moving target, but like in a good way. So yeah, we're flying around trying to get stuff done this morning, like a lot of mornings. So it's good.
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit about you. You are the owner, founder of Causeway Collaborative.
Yeah.
Yes, which is an organization that I love. Just from
I
afar,
appreciate that.
even seeing it, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've had some, I'll say other people from Causeway on the podcast, like
Yeah.
Heather and John and Justin was connected all of us. So it's been fun.
Yeah. No, it's great. And obviously, some of our team were, you know, it's a bunch of great folks. They're, super skilled at what they do, and it's been a pleasure to work with those guys and just to do work that matters, So that's cool.
Yeah. How did you start Causeway?
Yeah. So uh, I was a wayward young man, once upon a time, and during that period, um, was able to make some positive changes in my life to sort of get things back on track for myself, but also recognize that this was work that I like wanted to commit myself to doing like for my life's work, So um so that was a piece of it. I sort of had I felt that I had a calling and a passion for this work. Um but I wanted to do it differently. I'm a, you know, outside the lines, kind of play by my own rules sort of guy and sort of always have been. And this was really no different. So like I thought a lot about my experiences in mental health and receiving mental health services as a, young man, um, considered what I felt was most beneficial about those experiences and like what I didn't enjoy or what I didn't find to be productive. And when I started thinking about what I could do differently, I started my business when I was like 28, 29, in a very saturated, from a mental health perspective, part of the country. Fairfield County has more therapists per capita than any other county. And so, you got to try to do something to stand out. And I definitely not the smartest guy, definitely not the most experienced guy. But I knew that there were ways in which I could do this work that were different and that might appeal to some people. And so I really tried to lean in hard to, the elements of what I felt I could offer that were unique to me and, kind of bundled all that stuff together with a little bit of a different flavor. And that's how Causeway started.
Yeah. What do you feel like you needed as a young man going through what you went through
Yeah.
that maybe influenced how you started Causeway?
Yeah, great question. So, a couple things. I think one, like a male influence, and honestly, like a male influence that wasn't my dad. My dad and I have evolved in our relationship over the years, and we have a much better relationship than we used to, for sure. But like he was a guy going through his own stuff, and as a guy going through his own stuff, it was challenging for him, I think, to support me in going through my own stuff. So I needed male influence that wasn't my father. Um, I struggled to find that, like outside of a coaching framework. I was an athlete my whole life. So like once I graduated from high school and went to college and like wasn't playing football in college anymore, I really struggled to find like external male presence that could help me, teach me things like, put an arm around the shoulder metaphorically and like physically and guide me, So I think that male to male mentorship piece is very real. Like we've seen it. We've seen the efficacy of it. We believe in that. And so that was a core tenet of what I felt like young men needed, that guidance. But like in a, throwback tribal society, kind of man to man type way. So that was a piece. I felt like practical skills was something that I needed, right? Like I didn't know anything about finance. I didn't know anything about like the job process. I didn't know anything about like, how do you buy a house? How do you buy a car? How do you pay rent? What's credit? Like, I mean, they used to have checkbooks. I didn't know anything about those. So, like, practical life skills that young men in the world just require knowledge around. I didn't know any of that stuff. Um, and I'm not alone. And it's actually worse now than it was 20 years ago. So there was an element of life skills acquisition that I felt was sorely missing in me that I believed and but still believe that young men desperately need, even above and beyond like conventional classroom education, in a lot of ways. And then, lastly, I think, career readiness. But like most specifically around, I would say, like identifying a purpose and identifying like one's pursuit. Really from two vantage points. I think men often get trapped in like the conveyor belt of what I would call like soulless work and end up, not enjoying their life, not enjoying their partnership, outwardly leaning from their kids, engaging in things they shouldn't be engaging in because they do soul sucking, mundane shit work, 24/7, 365. Um, and I think that there is a better alternative for all of us, but specifically for men. I think men are so kind of connected deeply to this notion of identity through the lens of career, and that a man's work kind of defines who he feels he is. And so I think like if you can match effectively like a purpose-driven pursuit to a realm in which you have skills, it's a lot easier for a guy to make a living and it's more enjoyable for a guy to make a living and he'll go farther faster and he'll be a better leader and he'll be a better husband, father, etc. So, this, work through the realm of purpose and then subsequently like the skills to go out and chart that course and do that. Um, that was actually how we started Causeway. So I started on the basis of doing career work with young men specifically. And, therapists would they'd maintain their therapeutic client in the form of my client, their client, our client, but I'd do the career readiness work and I called it futures. And that's how we started 15 years ago. So I would glad hand with therapists and mental health practitioners very, very intentionally stay in my swim lane and just get these guys jobs and help them get ready and like get them to college and get them clear on a path forward. Um, and we started doing really good work, and that's kind of how things snowballed from there.
So cool. So what do you think the difference for like men working with you in terms of having both a therapist and your role as like the career support in the
Yeah,
beginning? Like, what do you think made this like your work different from a therapist's work?
yeah. So just a quick side step.
Yeah.
Uh, so I wrote a book. We'll probably talk about it. But the first line of the book is therapy doesn't work for men 16 to age 30. Um, and the reason, from my perspective, is that um, guys in that age bracket, typically, this isn't always the case, but guys in that age bracket are pretty averse to therapy in general because they don't have the requisite skills yet to discuss their feelings with emotional fluency, right? So they also don't want to do it, but they don't have the skills to do it, even if they wanted to do it, mostly because they don't have the life experience, right? So what I was able to do with guys is have a very directive, intentional process where they'd come see me for an hour and we just do a bunch of shit, and like get things done. And I think, young people, particularly guys who are disorganized, who lack structure, who have a difficult time sequencing steps and going A to B to C to D. The challenge with, I'm a therapist, I've been a therapist for many years. The challenge with doing therapy with guys is like you give them something to do, they come back the next week, they just don't do it. And so there's aspirational goals in therapy that just kind of fall by the wayside because of all the things I just described. Guys have, struggles with executive function and difficulty organizing and planning and, have a hard time sequencing and don't task execute. And so there's all these elements that make it hard for them to follow through and do the stuff that you ask them to do that they want to do that then they just don't do. Well, when we just contained it to the hour and said, all right, like let's make a 3-step plan for today and let's just do 3 things, ready, set, go. And we would do 3 things. And then I'd give them one thing to do. And I think with the momentum of the things that we did in session, there's a greater likelihood that they would then subsequently do that thing that was homework, feeling like they had some momentum after them. That that attacking the inertia of their life by doing something really is the biggest difference. And it's not to suggest that guys can't do it on their own. They can. It's harder to, in my opinion. And I think it's in many ways just easier to have it modeled for you, right? Like I'm not doing the work for the guy, but I'm giving him feedback about what to do and how to do it and how to do it differently than he would do it, so that the next time he knows sort of a best practice framework anyway, which is going to save him time and, help him feel better about the product. So, that task completion piece is really the primary difference between this type of, kind of coaching work, whether it's in the career realm or otherwise, and like, straight ahead therapy.
It sounds like you're pulling into the confidence competence piece. We're building your confidence by increasing your competence. The more that you feel like you can accomplish things
Yep.
through like and have a guide through those accomplishments of like,
Yeah.
all right, we're going to focus on this one task and that's what we're going to do. And it's like, okay, if I can do that, then there is that increase in like self-belief, confidence, really trusting in self so that you have the and both. So it sounds like that framework is really what helps. Like I think about the mood follows action
Yeah.
like slogan, and I'm like it is true that there is like more the like it sounds like that for men the action oriented like modalities like help because of that, and I can see it, I can tangibly do it, I can see myself change because I've done something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And I think I have found that as men become confident, they can then be more introspective, right?
Mhm.
So, they feel more grounded in themselves. They have more certitude about their identity and their goals and who they were and who they are. They're more ready and able to examine their mistakes and make meaning of those things. I think when you are lacking meaning and confused, it's very difficult to organize your mind and make sense of your thoughts. So I think when you can like see the map more effectively and who you were, who you are, who you want to be, um, there becomes a deeper need for therapeutic work alongside that, right? But like when you have a 17-year-old kid who's never had a job, who's a C student, who has a shitty relationship with his parents, who doesn't do any extracurricular activities, who smokes weed and play video games, like there's not a lot of meaningful content to do in the realm of therapeutic work from my perspective. It's like, yo, you got some stuff to do, go do it. And so I think once you can help that guy do some of that stuff, you get a little bit of the noise out of his head about where to start and how to go about that process. And then you can actually make space for the work thereafter. I'm not saying therapy is useless. I've devoted my life to it in many ways and practically do the work, myself in my own life and have for 20 years. I see the value, but I'm a willing consumer. And that's a big difference, right? Like so many of the guys that we see are not willing consumers of therapy. And I think you have to change the landscape of their life so that you can change their willingness to receive therapeutic intervention and engage in that kind of a process.
Absolutely. You when you were talking about before about it's like, you have the framework of the guy who's like miserable in his job. And I love the story of Peter Pan. So I
Yeah.
think about this a lot because like this the beginning of the story of Peter Pan is like you have like the Darling family and Mr. Darling who hates his job, like totally resents his kids, resents his family, and then you have this whole like lost boy narrative. So like last week I wrote this article of like like how it's the Wendy's of the group, like, right? And it's like, well, where was Wendy through all this? And like Wendy's typically the mom who is bringing in her 17-year-old son because she's going, I
Yeah.
keep nagging him, he's not doing anything, and I'm just making him more upset. Like, or like, I'm the wife or the girlfriend who's going like, well, where are we going? Like, how is this all going to play out? And he has no direction or purpose. And so then it's like, well, I keep trying to look for answers and I'm not getting them. Like I'm running into this wall. Like, so I think about how this like interplays with like,
Yeah.
so many roles of like family systems, relational systems, but also how it's like when we're operating from it's either you're miserable in your job and you're an adult and it
Yeah.
sucks,
Yeah.
or you're a lost boy and you're having fun all the time. Like you don't have like a great middle ground or
No.
a great sense of purpose and what it means to move forward towards something.
Yeah, yeah. And like I mean I write a lot about and think and talk a lot about like sort of icons of manhood, right?
Mm.
And like, the masculine ideal and what it even is to be a man. Like what does that even mean? You know, like and like what do we ascribe meaning to in terms of manhood, and what are we aiming at, and like what we want our sons to be, what we aspire to be ourselves. Like, when we examine the conduct of like, athletes and rappers and, icons of cinema, and like, think about who those guys are in terms of their job and outside of their job. Like, are those the people that we aspire to be like and raised our sons to be like? Um, in terms of like conventional occupations that were, those in which we wanted men to do and be like, a lot of them aren't even around anymore, right? And like, there's been such like movement away from, men occupying certain fields and participating in certain, jobs themselves, that like conventional jobs that guys had are jobs that they don't really gravitate towards anymore in some instances. And so like, you see guys flailing out of college and like, getting, metaphorically their teeth kicked in by girls in every realm of academics and study. I mean, my son's been in the hospital for a couple of months. There's not a lot of doctors who are guys anymore around there. And like, there's even a migration from, men away from STEM and, women into STEM related professions. So like, that's not even a place that guys dominate anymore like they used to, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So like, what is a man? What does a man do? How does a man operate with respect to his family? What are the messages that we want to send our boys about that stuff? There's not a lot of meaningful pathway, to subscribe to, anymore. And I think that's become very cloudy, for people to latch onto.
Have you seen this change in like from your perspective since maybe you even started doing like in therapy to now? Because I'm imagining, I mean, like right now, it seems like that there are a lot of conversations around like, it's like what 58% of college students are females. And so
Yeah.
it seems like the Lost Boys research and things like that are
Yeah.
coming out more
Yeah.
about like
Mhm.
men's purpose crisis essentially.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, like, has there been changes over the past, let's say, 20 years and how all of this has been playing out?
Yeah. I mean, I think so for sure, and I mean, I think a good heuristic that I can use is like who would come see me, right? So like, what's the archetype of client that would come see me, 15 years ago when I first opened and now, right?
Mm.
So like 15 years ago when I first opened my doors, like the guy who came to Causeway was like, C plus C student, probably an athlete, and like would, probably was like, drinking on the weekends, going to parties, drinking to excess, doing drugs, but like had a girlfriend, like had a job, a part-time job, like had a summer job, like was getting ready to go to college, albeit, it might not have been like an Ivy, but like he was probably going to a college of some type where, he was excited about that process. So like a lot of these kind of oppositional externalizer types, like these, guys who would go out on the weekend and get into trouble and whatever. And, the kind of guy that I resonated a lot with because I was a lot like when I, 20 something years ago when I was in high school, right? In college. Um, Now it's like just categorically different, right? So now the guy we see is like, just like stays in his room, like stays in his room, and like there's even some migration from like a couple of years ago when he would like stay in his room and play video games with other kids like all over the place, and like they'd have a little community and play video games together at certain times and do raids or like whatever. That was like 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's like this dude just sits in his room and scrolls on his phone by himself, and like maybe watches porn, maybe doesn't even like maybe smokes a little pot, maybe doesn't even, but like just doesn't do anything. Like like so now it's like you just have a guy who's like completely extricated himself from society, who's totally isolated from his parents, from people, from relationships, and is just completely apathetic to the world around him in every way, shape, and form. And it's a little bit of a skewed pocket because like, we are in Fairfield County and Westchester County, like these are relatively affluent suburbs. So like you have some resources broadly within the family system and means by which that you can like support Jimmy or Johnny's existence into infinity if he just wants to do that and doesn't want to do anything else. So
Hmm.
there's a tremendous amount of systems work and enabling that like is going on within that framework where like if you were in a different pocket of the country, you might not see the same stuff. But
Yeah.
from my understanding and through the research I've done and through everything I know, you're seeing a lot of that same stuff every which way. It's like this just complete apathy towards doing anything and an unwillingness to like try and fail even small, or just do or attempt, so the work with these guys is to like get them to do a thing, literally anything, because they're doing nothing. And that is different than what I started doing, right? Like 15 years ago it was like, all right, you got this guy who's like a bundle of just messy energy, and you just got to take the mess and funnel it into a more favorable direction. Like that was
Mhm.
easy, like that speaks to my soul. And like it was easy for me to take these guys who were doing all this shenanigans and just get them doing positive stuff. But now, like to take someone who's doing nothing and get them to do anything is actually way harder. It's much, much harder. And that's become a lot of the work that we do now.
There's a lot more inertia to overcome.
Totally. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So does that then change the modality? I say modality, like loosely framing that. Like, does that then change like how the work is done?
Um, I don't think I think it changes the nuances of the work, but I don't think it changes the broad frame, right?
Yeah.
Like the broad frame is still um, do a tangible thing, build on that tangible thing, do the next thing, then the next thing, cut it up into bite-sized chunks so that people don't get overwhelmed, and identify like the inroads or the through line and steer everything in the direction of the inroads or the through line and reverse engineer backwards from that. Right. So like you got to begin with like the thing that's going to make the kid open and avail himself to doing anything. Right. So to me, that the diagnostic of that and the match of like the kid and the kid's aptitudes and the kid's interests and the kid's willingness and like and the requisite thing you're going to match him to, that's still the most important part. And in some ways intuitive, but in a lot of ways not. Like there's a lot of things that we do to you know gather information and ask a lot of questions and help a kid understand what exactly might be a good match. And I think the other piece is um you know, we've had to become, to your point, like what is different? We've just become more patient. Like
Mm.
we've had to be more patient with the process. We've had to set expectations with parents to be more patient with the process because
Mm.
the resistance is so significant. Like Johnny comes in, we just can't rip and run and like start doing work now. Like we have to like slowly get connected and get next to the kid and like intervention one is like go grab a cup of coffee down the street, not like start mapping like his ambitions and make a decision tree as to which way we're going to go first. So like maybe we'll go shoot baskets, maybe we'll walk up and down the street, maybe we'll get a cup of coffee, maybe we'll go to the skate park, maybe we'll play the guitar, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just getting next to the kid a little bit and having some trust and so that when we do decide we're going to take our shot, we've got a little less resistance and more willingness to engage alongside us. So
Yeah. Yeah. I I'm thinking about how if they you know, let's say 15 years ago, you have someone who is, an athlete and maybe going out and drinking on the weekends,
yeah,
they might get caught by the cops because they, roam the local park that all the kids hang out at. And it's like
right.
you can help someone analyze the choices that they make and go like, okay, so how was this for you? And like,
Yeah,
it's like when they're doing things, there's just more to work with. When someone's just like taking themselves out and it's like you're not even like there aren't decisions to be talked about. The decision is like indecision and it's kind of
right.
just what you're absorbing on your phone. So then, yeah, like, hey, you going and ordering a coffee down the street is you actually practicing these interpersonal skills and how to ask for what you want and know your
Yeah,
order and look someone in the eye and like that you're really integrating them into society.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you're at such a rudimentary level of functioning, like you have to be where you are and accept where you are. Like it's so easy to transpose like your own standards on that dynamic and, think about where you want that kid to be or other cases where you've done good work and become frustrated about the fact that like, it's taken 3 weeks to go get a cup of coffee with this kid and why that's so hard and why that lacks meaning. But the truth is it's actually a monumental shift and it's a massive correction for the kid in terms of like stopping the bleeding and allowing some forward movement in a situation where there just is none. I can't tell you how many guys have come through our program over the last couple years and have said um, their goal is to make one friend. Like quite literally, they have. It's like the most heartbreaking thing. Like
It's so heartbreaking.
it's all ridiculous. It's like both ridiculous and heartbreaking, but it's very real. And like
Mhm.
guys who say to me, "I have never had one friend." Like forget about like guys who have never kissed a girl and never engaged in any of those developmental milestones whatsoever. But like I've never had one friend, and I would just like to have one friend. Like hundreds of guys, and that's um, staggering, staggering, and it sucks, and it's awful, but it's where we are.
Yeah.
Like it's where we are, and it's a symptom of the problem. Like when I say that guys are, extricating themselves from society and locking themselves in their room and scrolling on their phones, like I mean it. And it's been going on, by the way, since they were 10 and 11 years old, 9, 10, 11 years old, which is why it becomes very difficult to untangle and rewire that stuff because it's so deeply ingrained.
Sure. So you wrote this book.
I did. Yeah.
And so when you were writing this, what were you thinking about that even got you to begin to write this? Like what are some of the experiences, whether that's personal, professional, all of it, to bring all
Yeah.
this in? Yeah.
Yeah. I think about this book and I get overwhelmed because well, I'll go back to go forward. So I'm typically a decisive person. I think sometimes that works to my favor. This was one of those cases where it didn't. So a lot of people don't write a book because they understand the scope of work required and they understand how difficult a proposition that is. I'm the kind of person who says, yeah, like I'm just going to write a book and doesn't think about that for a second and just decides that they're going to write a book and then, like goes and writes a book. And if I knew what was required to write a book, I never would have done it. It was incredibly painstaking. And, I think for me, I wanted to write a book because a lot of people told me over the years that I had a story worth telling, both personally and in terms of the work that I've done. I wanted to write a book because I do feel and have felt that I have a unique perspective. Like I've worked with like 3,000 or 3,500 families of young men and young men over the course of 15, 20 years. So that's a pretty unique slice of pie. And there's some lessons there that I think people could benefit from hearing about and having me, discuss. Um, I also had a pretty messy personal narrative, which was like my, you know, calling into this work, my justification for wanting to write a book like this. And like, honestly, most of the things I've done professionally have come out of my own personal experiences in some way, shape, or form, and thinking about how did I fix my own self, and like, how can I offer guys help in fixing themselves based largely around what might have worked for me, you know? So there was a personal experience piece there that I felt like would resonate with people who have gone through stuff. I've gone through like a pretty wide cross section of stuff. So there's probably something that resonates with somebody depending upon where you're sitting. I think the lessons contained within, the book is Boys Will Be Men, 8 Lessons for the Lost American Male. Um, I still consider myself a lost American male. I'm just a little bit older and I'm lost in different ways than I used to be. But I think the lessons are pretty practical. I think you can pick through and find something for your husband or your kid or your friend's kid who's having a hard time. It was meant to be like a coffee table book where you can like just pick up chapter 6 and like, here you go, here's chapter 6, read that. Not necessarily a book that you have to read cover to cover per se, but like you grab a chapter that works for you and you read it and you pass it on to the next person, which like I just thought was a cool way to consume it. So yeah, um I mean, it was a 2.5 year proposition, and I wrote like 800 pages to get to 200 pages. So, it was a very, very, very humbling process. My wife is a saint. She dealt with a lot and helped me a lot and, really scoped the vision more so than even I did. So it was cool to like have her kind of breathe life into it too. But yeah, it was a, overwhelming proposition that I'm pleased to report is now finished. So
But it sounds like a lot of people said, "Hey, we need your book. We need your book," and you said, "Okay, I'll write a book," and that's how this was born. Like kind of like a, "Hey, we need this resource from you." So it sounds like people were kind of whispering that into the background here.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, and by people I mean not like thousands. There were
Yeah,
there were people around me had
yeah,
said that it would be interesting if I wrote one.
yeah.
I was at a phase in terms of my own business and like my role in that business where I was um, just kind of looking for a little bit of a different chapter challenge, thing. Um, it's in many ways it's been like productive to think about like how to affect change in a different kind of way rather than in like a one-to-one direct service framework. Like, what do I've done these things for a long time around helping guys and, helping guys, look within themselves, try to get better, the tools that we would use to do that. How do I disseminate that information to a different, audience across a different modality? So that process was, interesting to try to figure out. It was good personal learning and a good push for me to like try to do a different thing and be humbled by the process of doing a different thing. So
Sure, sure. Um, what when you were thinking when did you go into this thinking there were going to be 8 lessons, or did that kind of happen along the way?
yeah, that happened along the way for sure.
Okay.
I'm, as a messy, person and of all things, like, my like creative side is typically just like a pour out and, filter through kind of vibe. So like I had a general idea of like what it would look like. That changed like 3 or 4 different times along the way. Like the number 8 was just, that's where we arrived. I had a couple of different other stories that were written and then tossed and and so on. So this is sort of like the greatest hits compilation, I guess. There was a version of this that was much more of like a personal memoir. It didn't fit, for a lot of different reasons. And so I think like the structure and the way in which it exists now like is relatively close to what I thought it would be, albeit different volume of cases, different length, different focus, et cetera. So,
Yeah, it's cool. So the 8 lessons, you want to
yeah.
review what 8 lessons you distilled this down to?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, and I'll try to be relatively brief, but so lesson chapter one is brick by brick. It's the idea that like um, we live in a world of instant gratification, and things are not done through an instant gratification lens if they are to be of substance and to be permanent, right? So, change takes work and planning and like, the cumulative effect of sustained effort over time. Not, you show up and you're like famous the next day for doing a thing, So and there's every chapter has sort of my own personal narrative, learning of that lesson and a case overlaid that is, representative of that as well. And basically my story in parallel with another one of my clients was just we blew out of college. It was a mess. Substance use, mental health issues, myriad of challenges, and just the road back, like from, you know, in college, decorated athlete, go to college, blow out of college, it's a disaster, humble yourself, go home, get a job, do community college, find your way back and get your grades together and graduate and get high marks and go get a master's degree and go get a job. So, but that's a process of like 6 to 8 to 10 years, right? Like of hard choices and consistent work. So brick by brick is just the idea that like nothing good is easy or fast, and how you step into that long process over time. Next chapter's Name It to Tame It. So that's just the idea that our label is actually the prescription. I think as men, we run from our label. I'm a mood disordered alcoholic, right? So like, those were labels that I ran from for years, and didn't take the right medication, didn't seek the right help, didn't live my lifestyle in the right way, didn't sleep right, didn't eat right, didn't work out right, didn't take care of myself right, etc. So like only in wrapping myself around those labels and like, absorbing all of what that meant and absorbing the limitations associated with those, like was I able to manage them well and actually have a life that was balanced, and healthy. The story, the case is a similar story wherein, I had a guy on the autism spectrum who absolutely refused to accept that diagnosis and like pushed back aggressively against that, both in terms of, assessment and his parents and my own feedback. And then one day he decided he wanted to work on understanding the diagnosis and what it meant. And it completely unlocked, a pathway ahead for him. So, in understanding our limits and our labels, we're given the information that unlocks the keys to our future. So that's Name It to Tame It. Um, Provision is not a substitute for presence. This is a cool kind of look at some of the other influences I've had. So, really the snapshot of a lot of the fathers and the archetypes of the fathers that I've worked with. So, in Fairfield County, I get a lot of, hedge fund guys, get a lot of finance guys from New York, get a lot of guys who are CEOs and, very, very successful men. And they sacrifice a lot in terms of what they have to give up to attain that kind of material wealth. Guys who are, worth, 9 figures in some cases who, whose, kids hate them, who don't speak to their wives, who have ex-wives, who are in loveless marriages if they're still in these marriages. And just the idea that like, the kid suffers, the young man suffers as a result of the absence of the father. The one vignette that I use in the book is I had a guy who was a CFO of a Fortune 10 company. I had his son in the practice, and I go into the gym in the morning, and he's on Bloomberg on the TV. And it's a debrief from an earnings call where they like crushed, their earnings. Then the stock went up like, 6% the next morning. He's literally on the news. I'm walking into the gym next door to my office. And that morning before that, I taught his kid to fry an egg.
Ugh,
The kid was 27 years old. He had never fried and he didn't know how to make eggs, right? So like I taught the kid to fry an egg that morning next door, right? So his father's on Bloomberg. So this idea that like as accomplished as a man or a father can be, the presence of him is far more important than whatever he's achieving in addition to that, right? So
sure.
so that was three. Um, four is my wild chapter. Find your inner wild. And it's this idea that like we are eroding in our soul as men, both because of the nature of the society in which we live, but also because of technology and also because of, I think, just the lack of messages around how to be a man and what a real man who is healthy is. This absence of one's wild is something that I think plagues most men. And so most men try to fill it in unhealthy, unproductive ways. So it's about how do we find the way to nourish this thirst for something broader and something bigger than ourselves. And I talk about how as in a different phase of my career, I was doing kind of, consulting work in a, larger corporate framework and, wearing a shirt and tie and, um, you know, just doing stuff that was completely meaningless to me. And that for me, part of cultivating my wild was like just pulling the ripcord with no parachute and like charting an unforeseen path ahead. Stepping out of the known and into the unknown allowed me to be creative and like, pursue work that matters and make meaningful relationships and be a version of myself that was authentic. And that was one way professionally that I was able to find it. But I think this idea that guys need to look to cultivate that, through nature, through positive interest, through relationships with other men specifically, those are really important considerations.
Is
Uh,
that kind of like a don't be afraid to make mistakes?
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
You are,
I think so. Like being brave is certainly being wild, right?
yeah,
Like, and I talked about how, within a corporate framework, I was afraid to speak up for, fear of retribution and fear of losing my job, and that when you're afraid, you can never be wild. Like
yeah,
those things are fundamentally in opposition to each other, right? So I do think permission to make mistakes and being courageous are kind of necessary parts of that for sure.
sure. It's kind of embracing that.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
part of
For
it.
sure.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, never tap out is the next chapter. Um, the notion that any situation that you're in, and no matter how difficult the circumstances, you can win if you don't give up. So I wrote about real difficult period in my marriage when my wife and I were struggling and like had to do some deep work to like get back on the same page and kind of move through it. And that was 7 or 8 years ago. We're happily married and doing much better now. Also wrote about how I worked a multi-year case with a young man who was suicidal after the loss of his best friend, and the trauma associated with that case and the corollary trauma for his parents. And he was a violent, he was a very like kind, well-adjusted, smart, popular, cool kid prior, and then was just completely off the rails after he lost his buddy. So, sort of like his ability to not give up, his parents not giving up on him, kind of unyielding commitment to his path to well-being and his renewed mental health. So, just really cool examples of like how hard situations can get fixed or seemingly impossible situations can get fixed if you just keep going.
Sure.
Um, Iron Sharpens Iron is the next chapter. Just talking about the necessity of male relationship and how difficult it is for guys to avail themselves to like deep relationship. Um, I think most men sort of gravitate to like the ball field and like, the card table, the bar room, like all these kind of places that we gather as men. And those are very superficial surface relationships, where
Mhm.
there's not a lot of vulnerability or authenticity. Um, and I talked about how, um, when I was really struggling in a lot of ways as an adult man, like I um, found strength in a new type of vulnerability and authenticity with my best friend at the time, and what that relationship was for me and how it was transformative in that way, and then how I paid that relationship forward to another guy. So just the way in which male relationship can be transformative, especially if you've never experienced it before. So in the way in which I'm describing. Um, Gentle Strength is the next chapter. So I wrote this about my daughter and about how hard it was for me to learn how to be a girl dad. How I'm like so innately wired to do like guy stuff and had like never really hung around little girls before, and like um certainly like Emma, pretty aggressive, like outspoken, bombastic, like kind of type for sure. And like really needed a lot of like fine tuning and refinement in those ways, and like had to completely shift the way I thought about like relationships. So um that was a cool construct to like lead with and through. And then I talked a lot about how um, being gentle is actually being strong because it's measured strength, right? And there's typically weakness denoted to being gentle, but it's actually not that at all. It's just intentionality and composure. And I've applied that since, you know, to a lot of my other relationships, particularly my marriage, and it was a good frame through which to just see things a little bit differently. So sharing that perspective, the necessity of gentle strength with other men, I thought was kind of a cool idea. And then the last chapter is just find your thing, and it's just sort of the foundational pillar that I've had in my career for 15 years at Causeway, which is everybody's got a thing, and it's your job in life to go about the business of finding that thing and share that thing with everybody. So I wrote about my sons and how I like had always resisted like being a coach, like a football coach, and their football coach specifically. And as I got a little older and was in a different position in my career, my wife pushed me and talked me into doing it. And it was like the most transformative experience that I ever had in my whole life. And, was something that I could share with them, that then sort of like became our thing together, so their thing, and my thing just happened to be the same thing. And then it became our thing. And then, pretty cool case around long-standing client that I've had who was, a messy kid who struggled with substances and went away to treatment and, really had a hard time for a number of years. Found his thing playing drums and like, went to like a, top five music institution to play drums, came out of school. Now he's teaching drums. Now he's got a little drum business that he's running. Um, Loves his work, super excited. Parents are thrilled, like, and all because, he took all that maladaptive stuff and just put it into playing the drums. So,
Like,
it's cool.
that is cool.
Yeah.
Can I ask, what was your resistance to coaching your son's football teams?
Um, yeah, I think it was just like conventional male stuff around like job and busyness, So like, why would I coach my kids for free when I can go make money and make more money, by doing it? And like, it'll be too big of a commitment. There was some self-importance there. I think like I'm too important to be doing, coaching, 8-year-old football, um, which is outrageous and ridiculous. And like it didn't sound good when I just said it, but I'm being honest,
Yeah.
and I think like I certainly had a level of elevated self-importance, like 4 or 5 years ago, and probably certainly prior to that. Um, but I've tried to work through a lot of that stuff, and in just being willing to do a different thing, as was the case with this. Um, like I found something that was incredibly special for me and my kids. So
Yeah. This, the way I'm hearing this is your version of the Bloomberg guy or the guy who
yeah,
was on Bloomberg
totally.
learning and his son frying an egg to
Yeah.
negotiating work to coach my son's football teams.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm so glad I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just cool.
Mm.
So you mentioned earlier you've been staying in a hospital for a while.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So what has recent life experiences taught you?
Yeah. Yeah. So just to go back real quick to go forward. So my middle son, Leo, he's 12. He's been very, very sick since July. So he has a rare condition called severe aplastic anemia, where his body can't really regulate the health of his blood. So he can't make platelets, which allows your blood to clot when you cut yourself or get bruised. And he can't make white blood cells, which protects the body from infection. So um, we've, we understood pretty quickly that this was going to require, aggressive measures and long-standing care. He, we signed ourselves up for a, double blind trial at Yale. We were grateful that he received the bone marrow transplant option. He went to the hospital in October to get his bone marrow transplant, um, essentially to save his life. And he had some very serious complications to surgery. So he had a fungal infection, sort of unrelated to the procedure, um, that took hold in his chest cavity in his lung. And the fungus ate a hole through his lung, ate three of his ribs, and burrowed in the back of his back, up against the spinal cord, and damaged his spinal cord in the process. And so he had a series of three emergency surgeries over the course of about a month, um, and was in a medically induced coma for 13 days. So we have been at Yale since October 2nd. It's January 13th. It's like 102 or 3 days. I don't know exactly, something like that. It's a ridiculous amount of time, but grateful to be able to say that he's coming home tomorrow. So ironically, I'm here today and he's coming home tomorrow. And yeah, we're overwhelmed by the whole thing. Um, I mean, what did I learn? I learned that there is a God and he listens to prayers.
Mm.
We had a lot of people, praying for our son, supporting our family and caring for us during this period. And I've had like 7 or 8 or 9 at this point doctors who told me that like my son's case is a miracle and it is a miracle that he is alive. Um, point blank period. So like if I ever had questions before about who I believe in and what I believe, I certainly don't anymore. Like there's a God and he does miracles. So that's one. And two, yeah, I mean, I think, like to borrow like a lesson from the book, like, kind of never tap out, you know. I mean, there were certainly moments where I was pressed up against that level of resistance. There were times where I wanted to tap out, times where my wife wanted to tap out, times where my son asked me if I would tap out on his behalf. Um, but we just kept going. We just kept going, and regardless of how bleak things look and how insurmountable circumstances present themselves to be, as long as you don't give up, you're still in it. And if you're still in it, you can get through it. So, it's like going to still be a very, very long process. Like, there are days where I think to myself, I don't know how we're going to get through to the end of this thing, 7 to 12 months from now. Um, but we will, and we'll figure it out. And, we'll just not quit and not tap out and just kind of keep going. So, I mean, those are the biggest two that I would say.
Yeah. The story is chilling. It really is.
Yeah, I
And it's
appreciate
so
it. Yeah.
great that he's coming home tomorrow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. The also, and a little bit before we started recording,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so you mentioned one that you and your wife being there, like in this together. Did it feel
Yeah.
like that it almost like you took turns, like who's going to be the strong pillar when the other one is feeling like really just like in the distress part of this? Like, did it feel like that it's like who's going to be here and who's going to be like, I'm a puddle and I want to tap out?
I mean, I think like she might give you a different answer. Uh,
Sure.
I mean, I'm definitely the puddle. You know,
Okay.
it might not seem like, I mean, I'm the puddle, and like mostly just with her. Like
Mhm.
I'm a mess with her, around her, in front of her. Like I can kind of button it up everywhere else, but I'm just a mess. Like I just avail myself to her uh in a different way, I guess. So like, I mean, she was certainly the pillar for me. Like, no, I mean, there's no question. Like both in the situation and as a support for me. I don't know what she would say. She would probably say I was a puddle the whole time. I don't know, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would say um there's so many aspects of that situation that I didn't consider before. Like everything from lack of privacy to like constant communication with people to like not sleeping, not eating, to like having your gaze constantly fixed on the most horrifying circumstance you've ever seen in the presence of or in the realm of like your son, with a breathing tube in and a million wires hooked up to him, on a daily basis. So, um, like from a sensory perspective, it literally hits you in every different angle, at every different vantage point. Um, and I mean, it was just completely overwhelming. So like through my therapeutic work. Like I like to talk, right? Like I like to like,
Sure.
vent and like communicate that somewhere. And I was definitely communicating it there to her. And
Sure.
she's like a
Yeah.
little more like she's a little more closed and intact, I guess. So I think there was a little bit of a rub there, but no, we've been able to navigate the circumstance, I guess. And but yeah, it's overwhelming in ways that you like can't even imagine it would be overwhelming.
Yeah. What Because you're, I mean, granted, because I'm imagining that this answer is going to change 6 months down the line, 12
Sure,
months down
sure,
the
sure,
line,
sure.
but like, how do you think this has fundamentally changed you?
Yeah, I hope, I hope it has made me a more grateful, humble person. Um, I think I would hope that it um allows me to appreciate the small things that I previously overlooked. I think when you're doing your life absent a circumstance like this, um, the things that matter most uh, aren't as readily apparent always. And I think my hope is that this has reacquainted me, like truly and specifically with a deep understanding of the things that matter most in life.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's like grounded in what matters most. Like, you're fully immersed in what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like when I think of the game Mercy, like I think that life plays mercy with people, and it's almost like that, like you're forced into what, and there's that saying, life doesn't give you what you can't handle. But I
Yeah.
do sometimes think that when you're met with that type of pressure and it feels like it's pushing down, it is sort of like all there is at that point is this like, what is here, what's in front of me, and what am I surrendering to?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sure. Sweet.
Sweet.
Any any we like covered so much.
So much.
Any thoughts, things that you want to leave people with, anything that we didn't get to?
Um, no. I think like um I would say um spend more time with your kids, you know. Spend more time watching your kids, spend more time hugging your kids, spend more time being in relationship with your kids. Um, I was at a hospital for 103 days and barely saw my other two kids. And, the time I spent with my sick kid, um, all I could do was think about like the things that he and I would do when he wasn't sick, you know?
Mhm.
So I think like just um like that time and that experience with your kids is so fast. Like I missed 3.5 months with my other two. Um, I think it impresses upon me the scarcity of that time and a willingness to be more intentional around what I'm going to do with it for the next few years before they go to school, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That this part goes by fast because what is it? It's like, there's more time spent with kids living outside the house than they are with you. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I would also like to add, like, I guess, kind of the inverse of if you're, people are, millennial age range or even younger, older, but spending time with parents. Because
For
I
sure.
think, yeah, I think that when I think about what it's like to get back to roots and building those blocks, that
Yeah.
while there's a lot of people who talk about dysfunctional families, and I know that that does happen, I
Yeah.
also think that there is something about getting in touch with your roots and
Yeah.
whatever capacity you have of that that is fundamentally like rooted in well-being.
Totally. Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. This was awesome. This was so fun.
Yeah. Anytime you want to come on, you have an open
Awesome.
invitation.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, this is
Of
great. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you. And
All right.
until next time, everyone, stay connected.